So I'm going to hand it over to David Martin and Luca. Um, will you be giving us a short introduction to Wikifunctions first, or
Well, actually, I have a full-fledged slide presentation for the entire 25 minutes, and it'll start with an overview of Abstract Wikipedia, and then we'll spend most of the time talking about wiki functions.
great? Looking forward to it because I think it's one of those new and exciting projects that maybe many people don't know about. So whenever you're ready, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Danny. I'm not going to be able to monitor chat very well, so if there are any kind of audio or visual glitches come up, please feel free to speak up uh, uh, with your voice. Anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, as appropriate for your case. Um, as I just mentioned, I'm going to start by talking about the motivation and the directions of the Abstract Wikipedia project. Then I'm going to spend most of my time giving an overview of Wikifunctions and then talking about how Wikidata today can be used in Wikifunctions. So Wikipedia today, as most folks here undoubtedly are aware, is available in over 300 language editions and provides more than 60 million articles across the languages, about more than 28 million topics. However, it is wrong to assume that there is one unified Wikipedia. The 300 language editions are mostly independent of each other. If you write an article in one language or if you change an article, there isn't much that automatically propagates the changes to other languages. This is why the knowledge in Wikipedia is unevenly distributed between languages. English has more than 10% of all articles, almost 7 million, or actually just over 7 million articles recently. Turkmen, on the other hand, the official language of Turkmenistan, spoken by more than 4 million folks, has fewer than 7,000 articles. So a factor between these two cases of about 1,000. In this situation, beautiful articles such as this one about Gladstone, the resident mouser of His Majesty's Treasury, are only available in 5 or 6 languages in many cases. This article about the monarchs of the traditional kingdom of Dagbon in the country of Ghana only appears currently in 3 different Wikipedias, including the one in the Dagbani language shown here. Even Waterford, which is the 5th most populous city in Ireland, is only present in about 1/4 of Wikipedias. So this uneven distribution inspires us to think about how we might do better. What would be the cost of fleshing out all 300 plus languages with all of the available articles separately authored on all the available topics? Well, if you simply multiply out 20 million topics by 300 languages, you come up with 6 billion article authoring activities. It would be great, of course, if time and volunteers and resources made it possible to cover all topics in all languages by separately authored articles, but this doesn't appear to be realistic, at least not in a useful time frame. However, what if a single contribution could make knowledge available in many languages? And in particular, what if it were possible to compose an article once in a language independent or abstract representation, and then use natural language generation techniques to generate that content into articles in many different languages? In this way, in principle, the rough cost calculation could be reduced from 6 billion all the way down to 20 million, more than reduction of more than 2 orders of magnitude. And this is the basic idea of Abstract Wikipedia. It's worth noting that Wikidata already takes many valuable steps in this direction. Just to give one example, Wikidata already, from a language neutral content, is able to provide info boxes generated into the Wikipedias of many different languages. Abstract Wikipedia aims to go a bit further by capturing the narrative structure of encyclopedic content and generating full text eventually. Furthermore, Abstract Wikipedia will depend crucially on Wikidata content, as we shall see. Abstract Wikipedia will depend on both world knowledge, such as items, properties, and statements, and lexicographic or dictionary knowledge in the form of lexemes and lexeme forms and lexeme senses, all coming from Wikidata. Most of the work to date of our Abstract Wikipedia team has been focused on building this central component, not only to support natural language techniques, but also to capture a broad range of procedural knowledge. And this central component, in fact, is Wikifunctions. So let's turn our attention to Wikifunctions. Wikifunctions is Wikimedia's first new project since 2012 when Wikidata started. Our initial launch was in August of 2023. For Abstract Wikipedia, as I just mentioned, Wikifunctions is capturing procedural knowledge of how to generate content in various natural languages. But there will be many other possible ways of using Wikifunctions. Just to mention one in passing very briefly, we've just started rolling out the capability of specifying embedded function calls on wiki pages. It's rolling out gradually to selected Wikipedias and Wiktionaries over time. So as you can see here, we're providing the capability to embed function calls in wiki text on various wikis, and then the function calls will return their values to allow for a presentation like this one, where you get the current day of week returned from Wikifunctions, and you also get the number of days returned from Wikifunctions, number of days remaining until Wikimania 2025. So let's talk more about Wikifunctions. Now let's look at an example function. This one checks whether a given year was a leap year. This is a function page for the function. As you can see, it tells you the types of the inputs and the output. In this case, the input is an instance of Gregorian year, which is a type that exists on Wikifunctions, and the output is a Boolean. So here we can also run arbitrary instances of the arbitrary inputs to the function right here in the function page. In this case, for the year 1900 AD, we get back the correct result that in fact 1900 was not a leap year. Every function has tests associated with it. In this case, we have 10 tests for the leap year function. We can also see 4 implementations on the tops of the columns. In this case, with all the green check marks, we can happily see that all the implementations are passing all of the tests, and also all the tests are connected here, which means the test will get run whenever the function gets changed. Now, here's the 4 implementations for our leap year function. You can write implementations in a couple of different programming languages at present, JavaScript and Python, but you can also write composition implementations, which are built by arranging calls to other pre-existing functions. So oh, sorry. Let's see. I'm just checking. That's all I needed to say there. Uh, Here's a simple example of a composition implementation, which relies on a clever algorithm. If a year ends with the same day of the week as the second day of that year, then it was a leap year. So this composition is a top-level function call to a function called same day of the week. That function takes 2 inputs, and other functions are used. Other functions are called to provide those inputs. In this case, this function provides what day of the week did the year end on, And then we also use functions to find out what day of the week did the year start on and what was the following day of the week. So if those are the same day of the week, then this leap year function will return a true value. I was going to mention the implementations of a function can use different algorithms. Wikifunctions normally selects the best performing implementation when a function is run in the user interface. Um, since Wikifunctions is multilingual, just like Wikidata, that means that each function carries labels from all the different natural languages that are supported. So you can easily see this composition not only in English, but also in many other languages, such as German, shown here. As of now, Wikifunctions has collected more than 2,500 functions, over 4,300 implementations, over 7,600 tests, with names and descriptions in more than 100 natural languages and contributors from more than 50 countries. Of course, functions can provide basic math, such as this one, which takes in two natural number instances, adds them, and returns the resulting natural number. Or units conversion, such as this one, converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. Here's a function that counts how often a letter or an arbitrary substring appears in a word. Uh, in this case, of course, the word strawberry contains the letter R 3 times, as the function tells us. We have quite a few functions for string manipulations. And here's a highly specialized function from the chemistry domain. We have a catalog page created by community members, which shows many of the categories of functions that have been created. In our remaining time, we'll mostly be looking at Wikidata operations, functions, and natural language functions. So now we can start looking in more detail at how Wikidata can be used today in Wikifunctions. We'll start by showing how Wikifunctions can access content from Wikidata. Um, Wikifunctions has its own type system, and the basis for working with Wikidata is provided by the 6 types shown here: item, property, statement, and so forth. These Wikifunctions types mirror exactly the corresponding types on Wikidata. For each of these types, except for statement, we have fetch functions, which allows you to pull content over from Wikidata. We have support functions such as equality and instance validation. We also have reference types, which make it possible to point to Wikidata entities without actually downloading them, and UI support for working nicely with Wikidata content. For example, our wiki functions type called Wikidata lexeme has all of these 7 properties directly reflecting what you will see in a particular lexeme on Wikidata. Now let's look at the fetch function. The fetch function calls a Wikidata API to retrieve the content for a given lexeme in this case, and then transforms it into an instance of our lexeme type on Wikifunctions. So as you can see, this function takes Wikidata lexeme reference as an input, and each instance of Wikidata lexeme reference is just a tiny object that contains a Wikidata identifier, such as L1234, and that enables this function to reach out to Wikidata and pull back the entire content and return an instance of Wikidata lexeme. So in the user interface, suppose I want to fetch the lexeme for the English word umbrella. Our user interface provides a lexeme selector, which contacts the Wikidata search API and shows you matching lexemes that you might be interested in. After typing in the first 3 letters here, as you can see, the lexeme I'm interested in shows up here, umbrella. And then I can select that lexeme and I can hit the run function button. And then the entire content of the lexeme comes back. These are just snapshots of partial results of scrollable content, which will show you the entire content of the umbrella lexeme, including its lemma, its lexical category, and its claims, nested senses, and forms. So yeah, let's move on. There's also some search functions that we provide that allows the user to use other search capabilities provided by Wikidata. In this case, the capability to find lexemes that are associated to other Wikidata entities, which can be very valuable for natural language generation. So in this case, this function, find lexemes for a Wikidata item, it takes a Wikidata item reference and a Wikidata property reference, and it's going to find lexemes that are related to the given item by the given property, and in particular, lexemes in the given natural language. So suppose I want to generate a phrase that mentions a house cat. In this case, I've selected house cat as a reference to a particular Wikidata item using our item selector. And then I've also told the user interface I'm interested in this particular Wikidata property item for this sense. I'm also interested in Spanish language lexemes. And so after running this function, I'll get back a particular lexeme, gato, which of course allows me to talk about house cats in Spanish. Once I have the lexeme reference, of course, I can use other functions to fetch the lexeme from Wikidata and extract all kinds of content from inside the lexeme. And here's an example of doing a bit of that. This function, first matching representation string from lexeme, it takes a Wikidata lexeme as an input and a list of grammatical features, which themselves are references to Wikidata items. Then it chooses the form that inside the lexeme that matches these grammatical features, and then it returns the representation string from that form. So here we're giving it the lexeme for gato, which we've previously fetched from Wikidata, and we're asking for the form, the representation for the plural form of that word, and the function tells us, pulls it out from the lexeme and tells us that the string we're interested in is gatos. Here's another example that similarly extracts from a given lexeme the present tense, simple tense, and past participle of an English verb. So for the lexeme begin, it pulls out begin, began, begun. This function is dealing with items that may have been fetched from Wikidata. So this function looks inside an item to see what values it has for a given property. So in this case, we tell it the item of North Epping, which is a city, and we tell it we're interested in the property instance of, and the function looks inside the item and tells us that it's an instance. This item is an instance both of human settlement and also hamlet. In the user interface, of course, these Wikidata icons tell you that this is content that's been retrieved from Wikidata. Also provides the link here that takes you directly to the Wikidata page for whatever the content might be. Now, these utility functions that we've been looking at, in turn, can support the creation of natural language generation functions. And our catalog, the online catalog, includes a breakdown of these by language. We've had contributions to date in all of these different languages. Here's some of the natural language functions in the German language. Lots of morphological or word form functions to date in many of the languages. Here's some similar, mostly morphological functions created and tested by Igbo speakers, which is a language spoken by more than 30 million people in Western Africa. This is one of those. It takes the infinitive form of a verb, an Igbo verb, and it returns the imperative form many examples of these types of functions. Now, here's a function that goes a little further in generating a full sentence. This is a function that generates kind of the templated first sentence of a English Wikipedia article for a given year. So in this case, for the year 2023 AD, it generates this sentence, which is already the type of sentence that's currently used on English Wikipedia, and it calls on other wiki functions, of course, to do some of the calculations and to formulate this Roman numeral and so forth. And finally, we can show an example of a very general natural language building block, which will be useful for generating many different types of content and which builds on several of the Wikidata functions that I've been mentioning. This function, indefinite noun phrase, takes two Wikidata item references and a language, and it returns a natural indefinite noun phrase for talking about that content. So um, again, the inputs are Wikidata item references. So we're telling it now I want to talk about the concept of a house cat and the concept of blackness, and to generate a phrase for that in the English language. So this function, again, like I mentioned earlier, it uses one of our building blocks to find out which lexemes are useful for these concepts. Then it retrieves those lexemes and it does some matching of grammatical features as needed, and it uses that information to generate the phrase a black cat. Um, Actually, that function is quite busy with doing a number of steps as shown here, calling on other functions. I won't have time to go into detail here, but it's a composition function that calls on various lower level capabilities. Now, we can do the same thing here by specifying in a different language, so specifying the Spanish language. In this case, of course, the function will ask call on Wikidata to tell it which Spanish language lexemes can be used, and we'll come up with the phrase un gato negro. Similarly, if, sorry, I thought I had. Oh, I also had French. Can do the same thing for the French phrase un chat noir. And also wanted to point out that, as I've mentioned, Wikifunctions takes pains to make the interface accessible to speakers of all different languages. So a French user can see everything in the user interface in the French language, including the labels that come over from Wikidata and all the descriptions of the content and so forth. So a French user could easily use the same page to generate the same English phrase for a black cat. And wrapping it up, I just mentioned that we have much work ahead. Or in the coming months, our primary focus will be on building out infrastructure for abstract content and building out the embedded function calls capabilities that I just mentioned, and many more improvements to Wikifunctions infrastructure and capabilities. And in terms of Wikidata content, we're currently quite busy filling in a few of the representational gaps, which should be completed in a fairly near term. And in summary, I just want to emphasize that Wikidata content of all types is now available in Wikifunctions for use in all sorts of computations. The library of NL functions is growing. The results of computations with the rollout of embedded function calls, results of computations can be inserted into arbitrary wiki pages. And we'll be focusing heavily on building out abstract content representations in the coming months. And that's it. Thank you all for listening. Now, as I said, I haven't been able to watch the chat very much.
Those of you with questions, yeah, please feel free to unmute and ask away.
We did have a question in the chat. Maybe that could be good to confirm from you, David. Sergey has written, if text generation is based on lexemes, does that mean that for item description generation, we need to link lexemes to items first?
Yeah, great question. In many cases, text generation doesn't have to start with an item as in some of the examples that I showed. But if it does start with an item, then yes, the links in Wikidata between items and lexemes are going to be crucial. And we're certainly interested to promote and support the Wikidata community, and building out the lexicographic content as quickly as possible.
From one of your previous slides, Jan Ainale asked, how do you count the countries of the contributors?
Well, I don't have all the details fresh in my mind, but we do have we have an instrument in our user interface in which, in a sanitized way that doesn't violate privacy, can detect which country a given user is working from. That's a capability that's across Wikimedia projects, and I think we simply count whether in any sort of creation or edit activity that takes place on wikifunctions.org would count as an activity from the country of the user that's doing that.
Thank you. Lydia mentions that you can use the Lexica tool in ToolForge to help connecting sensors to items. And that's a nice thing to do when you have some time to kill on the train.
Great. Yes. Thank you. I've been hearing about that tool, and yes, everyone is certainly encouraged to check it out. Is there a link for that tool, or there must be easy to find? Oh, it's right
There
here.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'll make sure it goes into the Etherpad as well. Andrew, would you like to unmute yourself and pose a question?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I think Ifatu was first.
You can go ahead also, but I can ask. Yeah, I'm Neslihan. We are sharing the same screen with Ifatu, but okay, I will go ahead and ask then. So I think this was super cool, and I'm a programmer. That's why it was also very interesting for me to imagine the things that it can be done with these wiki functions. But I'm curious to hear if you know any applied project by using wiki functions, like community projects or art projects. Do you know anything like that?
It's still relatively early days. We do have an active, smallish community that's been very busy in building quite a few functions as I showed. But in terms of like complete projects elsewhere, or outside of wikifunctions.org that are based on it, I'm not aware of any at present.
Thank you. Then, yeah, we'll have to figure something out as a,
Yes,
yeah.
certainly interested in supporting that type of activity.
Thank you for
Of
your
course,
answer.
sorry, that's all. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think then, Andrew, you wanted to ask a question too, no?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I hope there's time. So first of all, thank you so much for this brilliant visionary work. It's really important, and I can just it's obvious how much effort and how much passion has been put into this. So huge congratulations, and thank you for all of that. It's hugely appreciated. I have
Thank
two
you.
questions. Thanks. Yeah, I have two questions that are, I don't know if there's time for too much, and the two questions are a bit terrible. So a huge apology for this, like a huge apology if they're difficult to explain or controversial. I guess I'll go with the more technical one first. And again, really sorry. So I see that wiki text is never planned for as a possible output of Wikifunctions. I just put in the chat the link to the discuss or to the statement on that. I could just, I guess, read it really quickly. The answer, what's said by the team, I think. It says, as a part of Wikifunctions calls only being able to be used in a modern page system, this means that you will not be able to output wiki text fragments, only plain text and later valid balanced HTML. So my question is, it sounds like there's a desire there. Maybe I'm reading too much between the lines. Again, sorry if that's the case. Maybe is there somehow a desire to deprioritize wiki text in the future or in somehow relation to this project? And hopefully you have some background to share about your thinking or maybe the team's thinking on this. And thanks so much. And also, again, apologies if it's a difficult or controversial question.
It's a fascinating question, but I'm actually going to take the privilege of punting because I haven't been heavily involved in the discussions around that particular decision. I think your interpretation sounds plausible, but I cannot actually provide any further depth about that particular decision. Sorry.
Or anyone else here from the team that knows more about it?
Whoops. Hi, Andrew. I'm also from the team. So as far as I know, this is a matter of technical constraints. It's not. I don't think it's an intention to deprioritize. It's just this is something that cannot be done with the way that the architecture is planned.
Thanks,
Okay.
Henry.
Thanks so much.
So we're just a couple of minutes over the end of the planned session. If there are any more questions, and if David or Luca, you're happy to continue answering, I would be fine with keeping the floor open. But if you have your schedule or you need to step away, then this is the time we're supposed to end the session. So it's not a problem. But if you're happy to stay for a little while longer, as long as we have questions, that would be great.
I'm happy to stick around.
Wonderful. Then I think, Andrew, you mentioned that you had a second question.
Yeah, this is an even more terrible question. I'm really sorry. Let me also paste some links here. So this is following on some papers that were presented at the Wiki workshop a couple of weeks ago. I just put the one link in the chat here from a paper by co-authored by Adam White, who I think many of you know, and then another one. The first one from Adam is about translation imbalance, and really interesting. I did some research about how translation is often going from mainly from English and also from other large languages to smaller languages. And then the second paper is about oral history and the lack of ability to cite oral history. And these two concerns, I think, could be related to what it means for a community to be translating versus, or mainly translating, and what it could mean versus what it could mean for a community to be building their own idea of what knowledge is, what sources are valid, and it just seems like it's a potentially very different kind of dynamic. If you have one community that their main goal is to, which is understandable in many cases and important, just to bring knowledge in from another existing wiki source and to translate it, maybe not verbatim but close to verbatim, versus what you could have where a community is saying, okay, well, in our culture we have these different sources of information, we have these different ways of thinking. What is knowledge for us, and how do we want to disseminate it in a more local perspective? Like the skills you would generate in different communities would be very different for those two tasks, even though the output would potentially be similar in that you would have, Wikipedias in each language. But the community dynamics, the skills, the uh, and then the future perspectives for those communities would be different. And so this relates, I think, to Wikifunctions and also Abstract Wikipedia and also Wikidata, in that in this case also we have a centralized repository of knowledge where everyone from basically all cultures has to agree on what is a valid source to cite, what information should be prioritized, how it should be framed. Um, and so I'm wondering if there's concern about this being too much of a uniformization, a uniforming force that brings too much homogeneity, doesn't allow for local differences, and doesn't doesn't support the development of communities that have a rich skill set in developing ways to present and describe knowledge, and then also the danger of the more dominant languages and cultures um, uh, not taking over, but being too dominant in disseminating their own view of knowledge and reliability, and and how to frame that knowledge. I hope I'm not. I hope it's clear. I'm sorry to ramble a bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very clear. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important question that there's been lots of discussion about that within our team and other folks outside of our team. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's a little too easy for someone to get the impression that abstract Wikipedia aims to like supplant to replace all of the by automatic generation to replace everything in all the Wikipedias, but that is totally not what Abstract Wikipedia aims to do. We want to provide an additional source of generating article content, but not to replace any hand authored content by language communities. We totally don't want to do anything to diminish any language communities or their homegrown efforts, but rather just to give them an additional tool to flesh out their language, their encyclopedia. So, in other words, if they recognize there might be many topics uh, from other countries or topics that they don't have time or local interest to write about, that they should be able to take advantage of Abstract Wikipedia to fill in those topics for their readers. Again, with the recognition that they wouldn't expect to have time to hand author those topics in their language. And so again, we think of Abstract Wikipedia as a collection of tools that just helps each community according to their own choices to build out their content in their native Wikipedia.
Okay. Thanks so much. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Oh, that's all from me. But you can follow up if you like.
Then maybe one last quick question from Lydia, who just asked if you have a favorite function, um, or maybe any particular one that stands out as being weird or curious or interesting.
That's a good question, especially since I was just reviewing some of our functions for this presentation. Certainly the chemistry domain function that I flashed on the screen, which somehow generates the specification of the atomic shells for a given number of electrons. I thought that's one of my favorites, although I don't actually understand it. Maybe I'll go back and try some inputs and see what I can learn from running the function. But I'm also very fond of the functions that I was talking about that are based on Wikidata capabilities that do a number of steps. Uh, to retrieve first look into the item and then find the appropriate lexeme and then use that for natural language generation. I think in general those are my favorites just because they're juggling quite a few different types of knowledge. And because the Wikidata objects that we ingest are actually the largest objects in general that Wikifunctions has been working with. So it's been putting us through our paces in terms of some performance issues. But anyway, that's what comes to my mind.
Great. Thank you so much, David. I think there was certainly quite a technical session, and I must admit some of it went over my head, but it's clear how much innovation and care is going into it. It seems very exciting, if not a little mind-bending at times. Um, but definitely exciting to imagine how this can change the way we write and share knowledge across languages. I'm really, really grateful to have had a window into this work. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. I realize I covered a lot of territory rather quickly, and I will share the slides, and the slides have fairly well written speaker notes that should be helpful for anyone who wants to review all of this content.
And
And
can I
some links. Sorry, the slides also have links to some other documentation pages. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there is like a primer or like an intro to available that people can check up and get a bit more of an overview into Wikifunctions before they dive in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a couple of those links are in the slides. I don't have it at hand right now for the chat, but you could just go to wikifunctions.org to get started. Wikifunctions.org.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So we're just about quarter past. I would say we wrap up that session today. And then we just move over to playing some games. So I'm gonna steal the screen share again. And for those of you still in the audience, thank you so much for sticking with us till now. Um, for the technical team, I'm gonna ask if you could stop the recording now, please, and end it there. And we're